Good morning, wise students. Welcome to today's class. On Civic Education this morning for JSS2, we are going to be looking at pillars of democracy. Our set objectives at the end of the lesson, you all should be able to explain the concepts of the pillars of democracy. State the major pillars of democracy in Nigeria. Last week, if you can remember, we talked about democracy and we defined democracy and I told us about the features and importance of democracy. So today, let's look at the pillars of democracy. The 10 pillars of democracy refers to those political bodies that fosters the practice of democracy in a country. That is, pillars of democracy refers to the essential elements or institutions necessary for successful practice of democracy in a country. Now, the foundation of the pillars of democracy is built upon the rule of law, democratic institutions, transparent electoral process, majority and minority rule, and so many others. Now, let's look at the pillars of democracy. Basically, there are 4 pillars of democracy, and they include the legislature. The legislature is an arm of government, as you all know, and it is also one of the major pillars of democracy. It is saddled with the responsibility of making laws and policies on national issues. You have the executive as one of the pillars of democracy, and it is a very important pillar that is charged with the responsibility of implementing and executing laws and policies made by the legislative arm of government. Now, you also have the judiciary. As a very important pillar of democracy, the judiciary is popularly known as the last hope of the common man. The last hope of the common man. The judiciary is usually the strongest and most important pillar of democracy because it checks the activities of other pillars and ensure the accountability in the government. The job of the judiciary is to interpret laws in every case or legal matter and to pass judgments on cases. Now, let's look at the mass media. The mass media refers to a diverse array of media that reach a larger audience via mass communication. It actually plays a great role in ensuring democracy by exposing the actions and inactions of the government to the masses. A nation where there is no freedom of the press as a fundamental human right will find it difficult to practice democracy because it is the backbone of democracy. The media is usually referred to as the backbone of democracy because it exposes the actions and inactions of the government to the masses. Now, these 4 pillars of democracy have their different functions, but they are interwoven. That is, if any of the pillars is not working properly, then somewhere the democracy is still not fully implied. Is that understood? All right, with all of that being said, who can explain the concepts of democracy? Okay, any question? Okay, before we go, I told you that the pillars, there are basically 4 pillars of democracy: the legislature, the executive, the judiciary, and the mass media. And all of these 4 pillars of democracy have their different functions, but they are interwoven and they cannot work without the other. One cannot work without the other. They work together to ensure a better democratic environment. Is that clear? All right, here is your assignment. You have to explain the relationship between the various pillars of democracy. Explain the relationship between the various pillars of democracy. Thank you and have a nice time.